Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Clark, Death Peak. Chris Clark is an IDM artist from the UK signed to Warp Records. Gee, never heard of any UK IDM artists signed to Warp, right? For real though, this guy has certainly piqued my interest, mainly because Warp Records is one of the only record labels that I actually follow and look for new artists from. There are plenty of labels I will trust as a mark of quality, like I look forward to stuff from Planet Mew, Compact, Ninja Tune, RNS Records, and others, but I don't go out searching through those labels. Only Warp and Ultimate Records have that honor right now. Though I haven't perused the entire Warp catalog, I so far haven't heard an artist I didn't like to whatever extent, including the ones that weren't electronic like Battles or Danny Brown. So I trusted I would be able to find some things to enjoy in slightly newer artists like this guy. He's been at it since 2001, not quite in Warp's prime, but still looked like a pretty well-loved IDM artist, so I figured it couldn't hurt to check the guy out. And here's my thoughts on his discography so far. Yeah, it's kind of typical IDM, but it's certainly a unique brand of it. Very rough and fuzzy audio distortion textures, but also easily accessible structures and nice melodies, and some occasional peaceful moments as well. I'd say this is a promising start. Okay, as far as IDM goes, this admittedly isn't quite as unique, but the combination of the chilled out melodies and more intense and banging beats still made for a highly enjoyable experience. Suddenly there's all these jazzy and downtempo elements, somewhere between Square Pusher, Quartet, and Amon Tobin. Really great stuff here. More of a return to the kind of rougher stuff he was doing on the first album. Again, pretty solid. Reminds me a tiny bit of Metamatics in some areas too. More rougher stuff now with vocals and chiptunes. The guy's definitely developed a recognizable style by this point, despite all these albums so far sounding pretty different. Kinda like Body Riddle Part 2, sort of. There's a lot of cool acoustic sounds here, not as jazzy, bit more lighthearted, kinda more on the Quartet side of things, but still recognizably Clark. Very nice. Wow. I think this one may have been his best yet. IDM that emphasizes the D is a rarity, and this is some really awesome stuff here. He even got some Daniel Lopatin vibes here and there as well. Which brings us to here. So far this dude has not disappointed. Add this guy onto the list of great Warp Records artists that I like. While I will admit he's not always the most original of IDM artists, much like Lucene, what he lacks in that department, he makes up for in pure enjoyability. Guy can do abrasive stuff, he can do ambient stuff, he can go more abstract or more accessible. Tends a little more towards the latter. Undoubtedly a very versatile producer here. Having left off on one of his strongest albums to date, there was a lot to live up to for this new album here, Death Peak. I figured with a title like that we'd get something more aggressive, but I had no idea. So I jumped right into Death Peak. How'd it turn out? Well, to be honest, it's not that different from his last album, taking a lot of those dramatic and experimental sounds typically used by people like One-O-Trix Point Never, Arca, like that latest Outtaker album, and repurposing them in an easily accessible techno fashion. I haven't gotten the time yet to fully digest his self-titled album like I have this one, but maybe that might work in this album's favor, because I fucking loved this. It's got a pretty easy shot at making my year-end list this year. The dramatic tones of this album, the accessible melodies, the driving beats, I get similar feelings out of this album that I would when listening to something from like Orbital or Hybrid, minus the nostalgia. When I listen to this, I feel like I'm on like a train ride through the mountains and keep wondering if the train is going to get derailed at any point. It was an absolute blast to listen to. It started out with the intro, Spring But Dark, which got me really hyped up for what I was about to hear. Then went into the Monolake-esque Butterfly Prowler and the almost Hybrid-esque Peak Magnetic. Two super intense and driving techno-ish tracks with fantastic melodies really got me invested. The former had like some train whistle sounds in the beginning, so I guess that might have been why I kind of feel like I'm on a train ride on this album, but the latter in particular is excellent, and there's a section of like this aggressive buzzing bass that kinda calls back to his earlier work, like Clarence Park and Turning Dragon, which I thought was pretty cool. All these tracks evolve and change and are really fascinating on top of everything. Hoova and Slap Drones are kinda similar, but are much more percussion heavy, still keeping up the momentum the previous tracks had going. By the way, there's a lot of sounds of female vocals all over the place. I imagine Orbital was a pretty big influence on this guy. Between those two tracks, I prefer Hoova. It's like, they're just some really super intense and banging moments, but it also has kind of an ambient outro too, where like, good stuff there. The second half of this album, though, is a lot more like ambient and down-tempo centric. It's still heavily dramatic and somehow doesn't drop the momentum that the first half had going, but it's a lot less beat heavy. Aftermath, Catastrophe Anthem, Living Fantasy, they got that super over-the-top dramatic bend to them. Almost kind of cinematic, vaguely reminding me of, like, fuck buttons a little bit. Out of those three, Catastrophe Anthem's probably my personal favorite. Like, it has what sounds like a chorus of singing kids. And I don't typically like the sound of singing kids, I think it just always kind of takes me out of it. But here, like, just these choruses of, "We are your ancestors," just adds so much for me. And then there's the ending, Un-UK. This one is probably the weirdest track on here. Starts out with a lot of these pitched voice samples and proceeds to go all over the place, from loud and atonal to down-tempo and minimalistic. There's some cool piano bell sounds, there's more of these kid choirs that I still enjoy for whatever reason. And it ends with these kind of like synth string washes that kind of feel like the happy ending at the end of an intense journey. Man, a lot to take in there, and I've only been listening to it for a few days. I'm sure there's even more details here I have yet to pick up on. Overall, yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of this album. Is it anything I haven't already heard before? Not really. It does take elements from artists like Oudaker and Monolake and One Tricks Point Never and Orbital and Hybrid, but that doesn't take away from its spot-on execution. This really is like a roller coaster ride of an album, with a ton of effort put into it, and I gotta say, I loved every second of it. I'm not sure if it's his best to date. I obviously have yet to fully digest his other stuff, and I have a feeling I might end up liking his self-titled a tad more. And Iradelphic and Body Riddle have good chances too because of my typical down-tempo biases, but Death Peak is definitely among his best work for sure. I'm overall feeling an 8.5 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.